Representative, welcome to Senate Judiciary, and you're going to inform us about HB 1279 relative to the use of physical force in defense of a person. Welcome again.
Good afternoon. Nice to be here in Senate Judiciary. For the record, my name is Yuri Polozov, representing Melmark 10, Hooksett, and Dunbarton. This bill is very short, but I cannot claim that I came up with this idea. It was a multi-year effort on behalf of Hooksett delegation, even before I became state rep, to bring this idea forward. This bill provides much needed clarity and protection for law-abiding citizens who find themselves in the position of defending not only themselves but also third parties from a felony threat. This bill adds just a few words in 2 lines of RSA 627:4, Roman numeral 2D. And this bill has two somewhat separate goals. First is to add third person to the definition of those you are allowed to protect in your dwelling. And second goal is to add vehicle to the definition of places where you are allowed to protect yourself against a felony being committed. I believe these changes help the law follow the spirit of our Constitution and generally aligns with the statute goals. It also makes the law clear and helps avoid illogical court rulings. So why these corrections needed? I heard some arguments that a lot of it is already in the statute. But if you compare lists in different parts of RSA 627:4 and compare list in Roman numeral 2D with others, for example, in both Roman numeral 2A and Roman numeral 3, there's an included definition or a third person. But Roman numeral 2D, the one that this bill proposes to change, third person is missing. So that's something we are trying to fix. Also, if we compare lists in Roman numeral 2D that we are changing to Roman numeral 3, 3A says, within his or her dwelling, its curtilage, or anywhere he or she has a right to be. So there are much wider definition in 3 of places where self-protection is allowed. And we spend a lot of time in our vehicles, so I believe expanding this list in 2D is very important. So I guess I will stop here, and maybe somebody more knowledgeable on gun laws can testify after me.
Just a few words that scare me on page 2, the second line, or give me pause, where it says unlawful force. You can use unlawful force. Should it be like reasonable unlawful force? So someone doesn't, go way out of line. If someone's hitting me or something, I probably shouldn't come back with a gun or something.
Excuse me.
Sure. So my thoughts were it's just unlawful force. Should we define or limit that? How far can you go? And again, I haven't really put a lot of thought into the bill. I mean, it's very short, so it was easy enough to read. But so unlawful force, just in D.
So unlawful force, it's about a person who is attacking you and commit felony. I guess if a person, my understanding of this reading, and correct me if I'm wrong, like if it's undercover policeman, he has he can use force, but it's lawful force. So I think it's just like
Okay, so my
Like
thoughts
to-
are, it should be commensurate with what's coming at me. I
Yeah.
can't pull out if it's somebody who I really have very little fear and apprehension of, but they're attacking me, very small woman and I'm a big guy, I'm probably not scared, but I can't pull out a gun and shoot them either. Wouldn't be reasonable given the amount of danger I'm in. So I just didn't know if there should be more of limitation on the amount of force, but we'll think about that. Thank you for your answer. Questions? Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. So I'm reading 627.4, Roman 2, so the full sentence before these subparts here, A, B, C, D. And it says, the force involved, a person is justified in using deadly force against another person when he reasonably believes that such other person, and then we would start here, is likely to use any unlawful force in the commission of a felony against the actor. So that could be stealing a car, possibly. That's a felony. It's a motor vehicle. It's a dangerous thing. I can use deadly force. I can shoot that person if they're stealing a car.
yes. That sounds like I think your description aligns with bill intention. But when the person is in vehicle and I believe has a right for self-defense, they don't know why somebody gets into their vehicle and grabs and wants to kick them out of the vehicle. Like they don't know if it's like just to steal the vehicle or like maybe they cannot prove in court that they knew that there was imminent threat to their life, and maybe there was none. But often in those situations, it's hard to know ahead of time. So, yes.
So when in doubt, you could shoot the person and kill him.
When a felony is being committed against you, you have a right to self-defense using your firearm. And for example, case in Manchester, when on I believe it was BLM rally, when rally participants attacked two person in a vehicle, and it was politically motivated attack. And then those who were attacked, they were convicted because they, let's say, displayed firearm. So nobody was physically harmed eventually by that firearm, but because like they were not allowed to protect themselves in their vehicle in any way that could be construed to be as using deadly force, they were found guilty, and I believe it's not the optimal situation.
Follow up.
Yes.
So you're aware that I don't want to defend anybody who's committing a felony, but it could be stealing something that's worth more than $1,000 is a felony. So we're going to justify deadly force to defend against somebody who's going to maybe a third person that's going to get, shoved into the street or something as they try to get away. I don't know what the hypothetical would be, but a felony, although severe, might be just the theft of something that's worth more than $1,000, and there's law enforcement in the back that could correct me on that amount, but I think that's about what it is. So deadly force is justified, is my question.
I understand your question, but I'm not sure how it's placed, because it's already we already have this chapter 2D that talks about it. Just like I can, if I can do it in my dwelling and in my home, I'm just saying the same self-protection should be afforded to me in my vehicle. If I can do it when something is happens against me, I should do the same to protect my small daughter who is with me. If it's a felony against her, the same level of felony. So if previous legislators saw it's appropriate to use deadly force in this situation when felony is against person, I think like using the same when it's happening to a family member, for example, I think it's not a major escalation, it's just like clarifying.
I think we're in agreement if it was deadly force, if they were, came up to your car and they had a gun, we're with you on that. We're just worried about that you're expanding it to if they were stealing your car from your driveway, you could go out and blow them away. That's what we're having a problem with. Is that not where we're going? Yeah. So it's more the act, your bill would expand it way beyond like defending your castle or curtilage or doctrine of, home protection. You're expanding it now to say they're stealing your car because it's worth more than $1,000. That's what we're having a problem with. Or we're not understanding your position. I'm sorry.
So I need to think about it, but again, like this bill has two moving parts, and technically, your committee can approve one without approving another.
Okay.
So if you feel like vehicle is too much, like you can remove vehicle but approve third person, for
Okay.
example.
Thank you for your testimony. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sandra.
So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I'm always curious because usually there's a reason people file legislation. There's an incident that has happened or something that you're trying to prevent that has been highlighted by something that happened in real life. Where is this bill being inspired from? What happened that makes this bill necessary right now?
Again, it's for example, Hookset Representative Michael Yakubovich, who is now fighting with cancer, he came up with this idea about 5 or 6 years ago with similar bill idea. So it was years of working, and we have a right of self-defense, but the way courts sometimes interpret similar situations, it's different, and there were cases when for example, with the third person, as I say, like language before this line and language after includes protecting a third person, but this specific line doesn't include it. So that's pretty clearly creates situations when should such protection happen, courts would have to rule against the person who was trying to protect, for example, his family member against unlawful force in the commission of a felony if they cannot prove some other qualifying things like imminent threat to life.
I think I'm understanding better what you want. I think you, in line 2 where it says against the actor, so you're making it more personal, like dragging someone out of a car. So it is an unlawful force against the actor or a third person. So you're saying that wouldn't be the car example of stealing your car. That would be dragging you out or a force against you. So then you're saying you can defend yourself. I think that's where you're going, unless I'm wrong. I said the last words. We'll talk about it. Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Linda McGrath. But what do you want to buzz? Oh, you're okay. Linda McGrath and then Attorney Scheer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Representative Linda McGrath from Hampton Seabrook. And I think your concerns are very good because I don't think that's what Yuri is focusing on, just being able to blow somebody away if they're stealing your car. But if somebody is committing a crime and you don't know where that's going to go. And so I think that's what he's focusing on. So one of the things, this is more of the broad picture, people who advocate for taking away people's guns can always point to tragedies and tell you exactly how many people were killed. But the scenario of the good guy with the gun that stops a crime, did they save one person, two people, 200 people? You can't ever quantify that. I love the good guy with a gun. When I go to the Jewish Center, I know who to sit behind. Unfortunately, I'm absolutely aware of that because the Jewish people are targeted. There's other groups that are targeted too, but again, I am all for people being able to carry, defend themselves, defend others. I want to be able to know if I'm in the car that somebody with a gun isn't going to not pull it out because they're afraid of whether it crosses the line into from being under imminent threat to medium threat. Like, where do you draw that line? So I think that's the thing that Yuri is trying to focus on.
Questions? Nope. Okay, we're all set. Thank you.
Awesome.
Representative.
Thank you.
Representative Scheer, how you doing?
Good.
Good.
My concern with this bill is its breadth. I think the language, the adding of the vehicle language is what my concern is. Because it turns into a escalation of road rage in a way we don't want to have happen. If I run into the back of somebody or cut somebody off and the person stops, I stop, the person comes out with a hammer or some device and pounds on the hood of my car, this allows me to kill him, to pull out a gun, use deadly force. And I don't think we want that. The circumstance that you described of pulling somebody out of the car, that would be, you could use other sections. You could use non-deadly force in paragraph 1 of 627.4. You'd be allowed to use non-deadly force to deal with that. In paragraph 2, if they're pulling somebody out of the car, we're talking about a kidnapping potentially, and you could use section 2C and use deadly force, is committing or about to commit a kidnapping or forcible sexual offense. So, so I think the kinds of hypotheticals, for example, that the chair was referring to, are dealt with otherwise in the statute. And what this does is, with the language vehicle or, it's the wrong message we want to send about what people do when they're in a road rage fit. I just don't think I think this is an escalation language. So I have no problem with the or a third person language when we're talking about within such actors dwelling or its curtilage. But I think it would be better for this committee to delete the vehicle or language to prevent people pulling out guns amidst a road rage circumstance. That's what concerns me.
Very good. Any questions? We're all set. Thank you, Attorney. Does anyone else wish to testify on 1279? Seeing none, that'll end the hearing. Captain Amatucci, come on down. Yep, I will start. Senate Judiciary is now introducing HB 1348, an act relative to possession of human remains for the law enforcement training purposes. Welcome, Captain.
Thank you, sir. And before this hearing, I had provided an amendment that I would request be introduced as further work has been done on this bill since the last time it was heard.
When was that? Was that today?
Yes,
In the hall when I was talking to you?
yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I didn't even look at it yet, haven't given it to them, so it's a premature, but we can get to it if I. Oh, yeah, I was busy.
So thank
You did
you.
hand me copies?
I handed you copies, yes,
Okay.
sir.
It's Adam Sexton's fault. He was distracting me. Here it is. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, lots of copies. But I'm sorry, I did, not that they would have had ability to read it yet. Okay, tell us about the amendment.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. My name's Matt Amatucci. I'm a captain with the state police. So this legislation establishes a lawful and ethical process for law enforcement to possess portions of human remains and ensures dignity, transparency, and accountability when handling remains. There are several key safeguards that have been put into place. Written consent from the next of kin or the individual prior to the death must be obtained. Oversight by credentialed professionals, compliance with health and safety regulations, chain of custody documentation, and responsible final disposition through licensed providers. Stakeholders have come together to work on this legislation and are in support. This legislation was developed with input from law enforcement, funeral home professionals such as the funeral home directors, and academic institutes. We worked with Dr. Michaels from the University of New Hampshire, anthropology. And this legislation is recognized as a best practice bill that fills a longstanding gap that is currently in our law.
Very good. Do we have any questions? Senator Ridden.
Thank you. I know there was a Senate bill that was about cadaver dogs and training. Do you know if this mirrors that, or that one doesn't exist anymore? Or?
Yes, Senator. Thank you very much for the question. They were both mirror bills, one in the House, one in the Senate. And as we worked through the bill as it initially was, it just needed a little bit more substance. So what we have done is we reached out to Director Skipper at the Police Academy. And if you're going to have a cadaver program, you must have a policy. And in that policy, there are certain criteria, and that policy must be on file at the Police Academy. That is the biggest change that initially it was going to be done under rule through the Department of Safety, and we didn't think that that was the most appropriate way to handle this. We felt that as long as you have a policy that meets the criteria in the law and have that policy on file, that would be the most adequate way to handle that.
Follow-up?
Follow-up?
I'm looking at the amendment, and do you have a copy of the bill as introduced by any chance? In front
I
of
do.
you also. So the amendment tells me that we're amending those sections 3 and 4 of the statute as inserted by section 2 of the bill by replacing it with the following, which means the definitions disappear and authorization to possess them. I'm not sure. This feels like it should go after
Correct.
section 2, not replace section 2.
That is correct.
That's correct? Okay, we might need to. After, we'll fix this.
Yes, we want the definitions in there.
Okay.
That
Other
makes
questions?
complete sense.
We're all set. Thank you, Captain.
Thank you very much.
And does anyone else wish to testify on HB 1348? Seeing none, that'll end the hearing.
Senator Gamble, do you understand what I'm saying here?
Do I have this? Yes, I just have it.
But this is incorrect. This is saying it replaces section 2. We need it
And
to
it
go
does- I'm with you.
after section 2. Okay.
We'll work on that. Buzz, I'm gonna be seeing you in my dreams. Give me a second. Just trying to be kind. Okay, Senate Judiciary will now start HB 1173, an act relative to post-secondary education opportunities for inmates. Welcome Representative Bashir.
Thank you, Senator Gannon. For the record, my name is Representative Buzz Scher. I am Rockingham District 26, which is Portsmouth Ward 3. I also am the chair of the Portsmouth Police Commission and have been on the Police Commission for 5 years now. I've only been chair since January. This may be the shortest introduction of a bill I ever do. Currently, the Commissioner of Corrections is authorized by statute to release a prisoner for the purpose of obtaining and working at gainful employment. That's been in place for a while. All this does is say the Commissioner can do that, the Department of Corrections can do that if a person has been admitted to a post-secondary program, and they can release that person to go to classes. No extra costs, same vetting process, just they have to check with the institution to make sure they're admitted. They have to vet the prisoner to make sure he or she qualifies for, as they would have to qualify for work release. And really, that's the essence of it. A year ago, when this bill was first submitted by Representative David Muse, it passed on the consent in the House. It came to Senate Judiciary, and it, to use the technical term, got hijacked with a replace all amendment that had nothing to do with this, something completely different. So we're bringing it back again this year. Last year, the Department of Corrections testified that they were also in favor of this. So that is the substance of my testimony. More than willing to entertain questions.
Nope, don't see any. Thank you, Representative Scher.
Thank you.
Oh, Buzz, come back. I'm sorry. Senator Abbas, I have a question.
I knew he couldn't resist.
And I bet this is addressed somewhere else, but, because it doesn't really say anything about it with work either, but it says post-secondary education in the community, which they've been accepted. Is that only talking about in-state?
It doesn't refer to that, but in the conversation I had a year ago with Department of Corrections, they did not foresee somebody doing out of state, but it's not in the legislation.
But technically, even for work, or I guess for gainful employment, are they allowed to work out of state?
Technically, yes, but it's rare that they get approved. Understanding that it's, hour plus to get from Concord to the Massachusetts border, or to get to Maine, or so. Yes, in theory that could happen, but I don't know that it's happened ever.
Thank you.
We're all set. Thank you now. Okay. She speaks for herself, but that's okay. Does anyone else wish to testify on that legislation, 1173? Seeing none, ends the hearing. Okay, Judiciary will now move on to HB 1363, an act relative to employee candidate background checks. Welcome Captain Victor Muzzy. Oh, Senator Abbas is going to introduce the bill. Thank you, Senator Abbas. It'll take me 10 minutes, so.
Good afternoon. I am Senator Darrell Abbas. I represent District 22. I'm here to introduce HB 1363 relative to employee candidate background checks. And I'll defer any questions.
Thank you. Okay, Captain Muzzy, come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Victor Muzzy. I'm a captain of the Justice Information Bureau with the State Police, which is responsible for quite a few things, one of which is CJIS information or CJIS data that flows through our agency. This bill or amendment to said bill is basically flows from an audit finding that we had with the FBI, whereby currently the law speaks to the commissioner basically being the recipient of any federal criminal history record information for the purposes of vetting employees. As you can all appreciate, of course, the commissioner is not looking at every one of these background checks and is relying on those hiring managers designated throughout the department and the various divisions to make an educated determination on someone's suitability to be employed. As a result of an audit finding, it was kind of illustrated to us that we needed to clean up the language or add some additional language to allow for that practice. Of course, it's acceptable, but that needs to be supported in statute, which brings us here today. So naturally, we are in full support of this and appreciate everyone's work that that has been done on this bill. And I believe there was also a Senate bill, of which I apologize for not knowing the status of that bill at the moment. Relative to the language here and being the CSO, which I guess I'm in essence the CJIS guy for the state of New Hampshire, appointed by the commissioner and recognized by the FBI, I think if we just simply strike the word federal authorities, I understand the intent of those two words in the statute, but I think it's going to really lead to confusion. The FBI basically says in order for us to disseminate their record, it has to be in state statute, but that's really under our authority. And so we approve within this state those folks that are authorized to receive and review that information. So I just think it's a little bit extraneous language that might lead to some confusion. So if we just amend it to simply read, or to anyone designated by the commissioner within the Department of Safety who is authorized to receive criminal conviction information, I think that satisfies the standard for the FBI Criminal Justice Legal Unit, who will review this and likely approve it pursuant to those audit findings. Not that there's anything terribly wrong with the federal authorities part, I just think it might be a little confusing on their part when they read that. Like, what does that mean? We're the ones as the CSA or the CJIS Systems Agency to kind of make sure those people are authorized pursuant to what we know the standards to be. So,
Brendan, you all set with that? Thank you. Seeing no questions, correct? We're all set.
thank you very much.
That'll end the hearing on that bill. $38. Ellen, you're introducing, right? Thank you. Okay, so the hearing for HB 1438, the Honorable Ellen Reed is going to introduce and is the prime sponsor. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, honorable members, for the record. My name is Ellen Reed. I have proudly represented Rockingham 10, which is Newmarket and Newfields, in my 10th year. The bill before you is straightforward and simple. It allows mental health care professionals, workers to report animal abuse. This is the section that covers our licensing for mental health counselors, social workers, pastoral psychotherapists, marriage and family counselors, et cetera. This was brought to me by a therapist who had heard repeated, honestly gut-wrenching stories. Stories like beating kittens with wrought iron pans. And he heard other stories from other therapists as well, but they are unable to report these violent crimes because of HIPAA. HIPAA specifically allows any reporting that the state legalizes. So if the state passes a law, then you are allowed to, quote unquote, violate HIPAA in order to report that. And that's exactly what we do in law. And many of these professionals and healthcare professionals are, for that exact mechanism, mandatory reporters for child abuse, elder abuse, other violent crimes, but not animal abuse. So this therapist asked me to put this in. He checked with other therapists. He also checked with a number of professional associations on the national level, on the state level, in other states where this is already law, and has found that there is no problem where this is already happening. I will let him speak more in detail to you about what he's found by talking to those other associations. But it is law in 12 other states. It is different depending on the state, what the scope of the law is in that state, whether it's just social workers or more. But in every case, it is at least at a minimum social workers. And it also differs depending on whether the therapists are allowed to report or are required mandatory reporters. And just really briefly, the states where it is mandatory: Louisiana, Nebraska, West Virginia, Tennessee, Illinois. The states where it is permitted: Oregon, Maine, California, New York. I believe also Ohio recently joined that group. And the permissive language kind of allows more therapist discretion as to whether or not what the therapist is hearing in a session is reliable. I just briefly will walk through this very short bill with you. Section 1 says that a person licensed under this chapter, I already listed the professions, if they have knowledge or suspect in good faith that an animal has been subjected to cruelty, neglect, exploitation, or living in hazardous conditions through information from a client that would normally be protected, that they may report or cause a report to be made to law enforcement or the SPCA. Section 2, the duty may be discharged and no monetary liability or cause of action shall arise. And then 3, no monetary liability and cause of action shall arise concerning client privacy. And this mimics the current language that we have for protecting a therapist from monetary liability regarding reporting child abuse. That already is in our statute, and it's the same language. Originally, when I put this bill in, I was requested to put it in as mandatory. That's how I originally listed it. The House committee did amend it down to permissive, allowing to be reported. If in the wisdom of this committee, you decided to change it back to mandatory, I feel that the House would likely concur. If the committee wanted to broaden it, to include other professions like psychologists, I feel that the House would likely concur. Having said that, the bill as before you is the bare minimum ask. It is the lowest level ask. So this, for me, the fact that animals are being abused is enough to pass this. But the really big thing here is that this is not just a problem for animals, because the tie between animal cruelty and violence against humans, abuse towards people, is extremely well documented. In fact, it's one of the most well documented violent crime links in mental health care. The psychology is the same for a person who wants to and is compelled to be abusive and violent towards a helpless animal That is the same psychology as someone who will escalate to being abusive towards a person who is considered vulnerable or weak, a woman, a child, an elderly person. It is the same psychology. And in fact, that human abuse, which can escalate to murder, it usually begins with animals. It is usually an escalation pattern. In fact, when I put in some 8 years ago my bill, which became law to criminalize cruelty to wildlife, we heard very powerful testimony from a woman who lived in Nashua some years ago. She's older now. But when she was growing up in Nashua, there was a boy in her neighborhood who used to knock little baby birds out of the nest and stomp on them. And this boy escalated to harassing and physically beating up kids in the neighborhood. He came after her. She escaped. Eventually, he came after a boy in the neighborhood. The boy did not escape. This ended up being Terry Rasmussen, who is one of the most famous serial killers that our state has ever had. He started his pattern with animals. It is extremely important to intervene while this pattern is still happening with only animals before it escalates to domestic violence, child abuse, abuse of the elderly, and potentially murder. It is such a well-established pattern, the link between animal abuse and human abuse, that there's an entire organization dedicated to just this study. It's called The Link. And they document these ties. And in there, and I've shared some of their documentation, 70% of all domestic violence cases and almost 90% of child abuse cases also have animal abuse happening in the home. The reverse is also true. 70% of all animal cruelty, when it's investigated, finds other cases of human violence. And in fact, for people who are abusing animals, the violence towards humans has higher lethality. They are more likely to kill people if they are also abusing animals. Half of all domestic violence victims delay leaving their abuser because they are afraid of abandoning their pet. And children in animal abuse homes of animal abuse are 3 times as likely to abuse animals later in life. And there is a very strong tie between those children who experience animal cruelty in the home and school shooters. So it is extraordinarily important to intervene in these cases. Mental health care workers are in the best possible position to not only get the information that animal abuse is happening in the home, but identify it properly. And this is the reason why it's already passed in so many states. And so I respectfully ask that you please consider this bill and pass it.
Very good questions. All set. Thank you for your testimony. Representative Wheeler. Oh, okay. Thank you. I get you. Okay. Representative Diane Kelly. Keeley? No, Kelly. Yeah, it's pretty good. We're happy.
Thank you. For the record, I am Diane Kelly, and I represent Hillsborough District 32, encompassing Temple, New Ipswich, and Wilton. I am a proud co-sponsor of this bill, obviously speaking in support, to allow licensed mental health professionals to report animal abuse when they learn of it from a client without fear of legal liability for breaching confidentiality. I want to reiterate why this matters, both for animals and for the people of this state who are most at risk of violence. As you heard, a licensed mental health counselor, psychologist, or therapist in New Hampshire may hear from a client that animals are being abused in their home, and they may believe it. They may even be deeply concerned about it, but they'll say nothing because, not because they don't care, but because reporting it would expose them to liability for breaching client confidentiality. The law offers them no protection if they speak up, so many of them don't. HB 1438 would change that. It gives licensed mental health care professionals the legal protection they need to report suspected animal cruelty, neglect, or exploitation to law enforcement or to New Hampshire SPCA when that information comes from a client, which would bring us in line with multiple other states that offer this protection. It does not mandate that they report. It removes the legal barrier that currently prevents them from doing so when their professional judgment tells them they should. I actually lean in favor of mandatory reporting, but as it is currently amended, it went through my committee. Even permission to do so would be helpful. It's a meaningful change, and as the sponsor pointed out, it matters beyond just the animals, because so often abuse affects other household members like wives or even children. Children, when spousal abuse happens and then it continues on to animals, children are traumatized anyway, but abused pets really affect children. And as was discussed, the link between animal abuse and human violence is extensive and consistent. It's just staggering statistics. Animal abuse is not an isolated behavior. It's a warning sign, often one of the clearest warning signs available, that violence is already happening or likely to escalate. Roughly a quarter of domestic violence survivors report that they stayed in an abusive situation longer than they otherwise would have because they were afraid what would happen to the pets if they left. Animals in these households are not separate from human suffering. They're part of that same pattern of control and harm. Mental health professionals are uniquely positioned to see this pattern. They have relationships with clients that no other professional has. They hear things no one else hears. When a client discloses animal abuse, that disclosure is a short window available into a household where serious harm may be occurring or escalating. Currently, the law closes that window by exposing professionals to liability if they act on what they hear. But this bill opens that. It says if you learn something that tells you an animal is being harmed and your professional judgment says you should report it, you're legally protected in doing so. That liability that has silenced people in the past would be closed. So removing the punishment for acting on conscious and professional judgment is really valid and valuable. It trusts the professional to make the call and removes the legal threat that prevents them from making a report. The professionals covered under RSA 330A include licensed clinical mental health counselors, marriage and family therapists, pastoral psychotherapists, and psychologists, the people most likely to hear the disclosures that no one will ever hear. And this bill gives them the protection they need to act on what they know. It's a modest bill. It does not mandate. It does not punish. It simply says, if you see something and you believe reporting it will protect an animal from harm, you may do so without fear. The law will stand behind you. So for the animals who cannot speak for themselves and the people in their households who might be next, I'm asking this committee to pass HB 1438. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Seeing no questions, have a good day. Kevin Blanchett. Good afternoon, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair Gannon, committee. My name is Kevin Blanchett. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor here in the state. And this bill is really important to me because pretty much my entire time in this career, I've been faced with, not every single week, not every single client, but numerous times clients who have reported animal abuse or neglect to me. I could spend this whole time talking about different stories, but instead I want to narrow it down to just two, one of abuse, one of neglect. I worked with a client who did tell me stories and report that I was able to suss out there was neglect happening to their pet. They very much cared for this pet. This neglect was not an intentional thing. This was due to resources and capabilities this person had. There were resources that could have helped them out more, As a counselor, I wasn't really in the position to directly give them those because that was not my specialty. That was not my position. Making a report could have helped them get connected with the right people to get them the right resources needed. A couple of years later, I was able to get into their home to have some sessions with them there, and I did learn of the extent of the self-neglect that was happening at that point. Services were able to be put in place because I was able to make a report for human neglect, not the animal neglect. The animal neglect would have picked up on the human neglect, though, and that support could have come in sooner in that case. I've talked with a lot of counselors about this bill. I've heard there's unanimous, if not near unanimous, from the House support of this bill. With counselors, I've only heard support. I have not heard of any people not agreeing with it. At most, I've heard from the NASW New Hampshire that they were neutral on this bill, not opposed or support. But with one particular counselor who is firmly in support of this, she reported to me that she's actually reported animal abuse before because she did not realize that there was no legal clarity of ability to report. And that did lead to learning about child abuse, which was then able to be, the support was able to become in place for the children and the animals in that case. I've never made a report due to the legal ambiguity. I've consulted with supervisors, directors, legal teams on this, and it's been pretty unanimous that it's really murky, very risky, uncertain if we can report due to HIPAA. There might be, I've heard from one legal team, there might be leeway in duty to warn, but even there, it's really ambiguous. There'd be a lot of benefit from legal clarity around this issue to confidently be able to address these situations in the appropriate manner. With this, I believe that it works out better as a mandate to report ethically. We, as counselors, if it was just permissive, that would put us in a position of judging the case to determine whether or not it should be reported. And how we judge that, there could be bias in there. It would lead to inconsistencies with how cases are handled. Making it mandated brings a little bit more ethical consistency to that. So I like the idea of that. This is permissive in other states. I've been trying to get in contact with the NASW in Maine because they have a permissive law, and unfortunately we were not able to make a call before this to discuss this further, but she's very interested in talking with me about this because she has heard about this as well. But with permissive laws, I can see it being appropriate still ethically because we are not only bound by laws legally, but we are also bound by ethics on top of that. So ethically, if this were permissive, a counselor would still have to follow ethical protocol, which helps protect against the concerns I have ethically with if it was just permissive. So I am for mandated preferably, but also with permissive, I think that would be there's still the ethics that backs that up. If this is permissive, it is also labeled a duty to report based on this law, and I think there's some conflicting language there. So if it's kept permissive, I still recommend changing the word duty to another word. Our laws, our ethics, they evolve with our society. As society changes, our social changes. How we view animals has changed socially. So animal abuse, naturally, the psychology behind it has changed, and this helps work through that and evolve through that adaptation to our society, how we view animals and how the abuse of animals has really changed. It hurts the animal, it hurts other people around there, it even hurts the person causing the abuse. It lowers empathy. It also creates confusion with interpersonal relationships. And brings on feelings of dominance that the evidence, even the FBI has supported this link. It will come to humans. It often goes to humans abuse as well. I thank you so much for your time and welcome any questions.
Thank you. Yep, Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. You kind of alluded to this. So on lines 9 to 15, I interpret this as the duty is discharged if they actually report, or at least make good faith efforts to report it. But if they choose, which ethically they could choose to not disclose it, that duty is not discharged under the law. But, so to make that consistent, are you suggesting we just change the duty word?
To make it consistent, I believe changing the word duty would help keep consistency there and reduce legal confusion in those cases.
Yep, you may follow up.
And could we add a fourth Roman numeral saying, provided if there's, that they're in compliance with the code of ethics, there's no legal duty? It's a rough way of wording it, but it would be a little more elegant than that on paper. Would that solve the problem?
I think it possibly could, but I'm not a legal expert, so unfortunately that's a little bit harder for me to answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Kurt Ehrenberg.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keith, always good to see you. How you doing?
Good afternoon, senators, members of the committee. Thanks for holding this hearing. I'll be brief. The folks before me gave you an excellent synopsis as to why this is a good bill. The simple fact that it protects animals is a good reason. It protects victims of domestic violence. It identifies child abuse. And it prevents future violent crime from taking place. So it's a good bill. We support it. I'm ready to take any questions.
Thank you for the brevity. Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Should this maybe not be under duty to warn? The duty to warn statute versus creating a new space under 330, section 35?
I would acquiesce to your wisdom on that.
Okay. Yeah, because yeah, I think what I'm struggling with is that animals are considered property in New Hampshire. And so a threat against property can be reported. So I guess we're going to work it out on the side of the table, but thank you
Yeah, I'd
for
be happy to
entertaining that.
Work
Yeah,
with on any amendment, but it is a good
Yeah.
bill. The concept is important
yeah,
to protect animals and the people of New Hampshire. So thank you.
agreed.
Thank you,
Looking for the right place for it. Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone else wish to testify on 1438? Come on up.
Good afternoon. For the record, Dee Jers, Executive Director, OPLC. I apologize for missing the sign-up sheet before it came up to you. Office is not taking a position, just wanted to raise a few thoughts for the committee's consideration. One of them, I think, is very similar to, I assume what the discussion is over here. One of the concerns or the considerations is that you would create kind of a two-tiered system of some professionals who work in the mental health space who have the ability or obligation, depending on the duty, but not others. So it would exclude psychologists, APRNs, LADAC. So anybody that's licensed by another board, this is only the mental health board. As you all are aware, right, there's often it's a team approach. And so that there could be, I think that could introduce even less clarity than there is now. So it sounds like the committee is already considering that. So I will leave that there. One of the considerations for a mandate, if the committee was considering that, is who's going to enforce that mandate. And if it's going to, the option is that it could go to two separate entities. It could be to a law enforcement officer or to the New Hampshire Society of Prevention of Cruelty of Animals. So if it was one or the other, saying they don't have a report would not be dispositive. And which law enforcement, I don't know what that enforcement looks like. I don't know who's responsible for that. So it'd be something for the committee to consider, whether it's going to leave it permissive or make it a mandate. And then the last one, actually that's kind of the two pieces there. I don't know what in the duty to warn or any of the other considerations where you would not violate HIPAA, but where information would be shared that typically would be confidential. I think in those instances, it is two government entities who have an obligation to then do something. In this instance, it's a generic law enforcement or the society, and I don't know what that mechanism looks like. It's a newer mechanism. It's not a report to, for instance, DCYF, who is a government entity that has obligations. So I think if a duty or even an option to warn went to an outside entity, I would think that that's a different form of this notification. So I just would like the committee to consider those things. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Senator Ridden, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the very first paragraph, this starts out, a person licensed under this chapter. So we end up with licensed social workers, pastoral counselors, and all that. So you think we could put, if we want LADACs, we could just put the chapters they're licensed under in that first part there, but this lives in 330A.
Right. Which only governs the mental health practice.
Only
Correct.
330A.
Mhm. So referencing another statute of another chapter, another practice act, it does get messy. That would be confusing. And people governed by the LADAC board, for instance, wouldn't know to go to the mental health board to do that review. Also, you do, side note, there are many people who hold a license from the two separate boards. You have the LADAC board and the mental health board. So you might have a single person with credentials from each. With one credential, they would be permitted. With the other, they would not. So that could be weird. That's my technical term for it.
Yep.
The last piece to consider is my understanding is it's fairly broad when we're looking at child abuse. I don't have that in front of me. It's fairly broad. It's any license. Well, I think now it's any adult. It used to be a licensed professional. It was broad to capture that. So the committee might consider, if this is such a consequential piece, is there a way to describe that isn't just naming specific licensing boards?
And finding a different part of the statute that it lives in. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, Daryl, go ahead, Senator Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for taking my question. For the ethical rules, is your department create the ethical rules that the mental health professionals have to?
It's a combination. So there are some things that are laid out in statute. There are also some that are fleshed out in rule that would lay those ethics. But then my understanding is there are a number of professions, I think social workers and mental health workers would be included, where they have a code of ethics or for other memberships that they are part of. So it's kind of a both and, right? There's some statute and rule, and then there are some additional ethics that they would hold themselves to based on those societies, organizations.
And the only concern I had was the language has a situation where the duty is discharged, but if the ethical rules doesn't mandate disclosure of the confidential information. I'm not sure it says that, but I think the prior witness kind of alluded to that. You'll have a conflict with the ethics and the law, so I'm not sure.
Certainly, anything in rule would be amended to be in line with whatever law was passed. So we wouldn't have a conflict. If a conflict exists, we would do that. But it sounds like the committee may be doing some more work, and so they could refine that language as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Senator, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So we brought this up earlier, if maybe this should be in duty to warn. And within the duty to warn chapter, and if you'll just indulge me on this one, it says a person licensed under this chapter, which is the ones we were just talking about, has a duty to warn of or take reasonable precautions to provide protection from a client's violent behavior when the client has communicated to such licensee a serious threat of physical violence against a clearly identified or reasonably identified victim or victims, or a serious threat of substantial damage to real property. Now, I know that this might seem convoluted, but animals are considered property in New Hampshire, real property. Okay. All right. So if in the example you cited where a dual licensure, where they're licensed under this chapter and then licensed under another chapter, and we pass this, is their license in another chapter in danger? If we don't mention the other chapter, could they be violating their license? Like, we want to make sure people are able to use a system without being penalized on another end.
I don't want to speculate, and certainly it would depend on the facts of a case if there was an enforcement matter in front of the office, but I
Yeah.
would say certainly any ambiguity does increase risk. So it sounds like this might introduce ambiguity.
Thank you.
Sorry, just really quickly to respond, I would say, I think pets would be considered property, maybe not real property, that's a specific definition, but I don't know if that would refer to wildlife, and my understanding of this is it would be quite broad, it would include squirrels, chipmunks, birds.
I know we already covered wildlife in a
Yeah.
previous bill. Yeah, thank you.
Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, I have another question, which is kind of a statutory construction question, and it came from something you just said a few minutes ago. So we do a duty to warn in this statute. We pick out a certain group of licensees with a duty to warn, and who they warn is another non-state agency. Do we then have to put something in the statute of whether it's the police or somebody like that that says what they have to do when they, so we can say duty to warn, you have to tell your local police, but that doesn't guarantee the local police do anything, correct?
I would agree with your statement. I wouldn't want to posit any further on what the policy remedy for that reality is, but I would say that is the current state. I mean, certainly there's there are lots of obligations, right? Police do have a lot of obligations for what they do with reports, and they have processes and procedures. So and that's way outside of my zone of expertise. But I do, yes, I hear you.
May I just follow
Yes,
up?
follow up.
So if it was a duty of report of one of your licensees that they had to report something to another licensee, the pharmacology board has to report to the medical board of something that's happened. When we change a statute like that, do we likely also change the medical board statute of what they do when the information gets there? Or it's up to them?
I think it really I think it depends, right? So sometimes it is just the obligation of you are obligated to do it. I mean, I have a ton of mandates in law, right? I'm obligated to provide, this is a silly, much less consequential example, but I'm obligated to provide notices of rulemaking to affected parties. They're not obligated to do anything with that, right? So that happens all the time. And there is still sometimes some confusion because it's like we have to do something and there's a concern like they didn't do anything with it. Well, there's no obligation for the receiving end. So I don't think that's totally unreasonable.
Okay.
Yes, but I guess if we're trying to equate this to child abuse, I would say it's different, right? That it's not the same. Yeah.
Okay, seeing no other questions,
Thank you.
appreciate your time. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to come forward on 1438? Seeing none, that'll end the hearing. Just waiting for him. I already have that one. This is what? And then these are other ones you're speaking on the bill. Okay. Okey-dokey. Come on up, Representative Knoll. Representative Knoll, you're instructing us on HB 1091, an act relative to the penalty for violations of municipal ordinances related to sleeping or camping outside. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is Jody Knoll, and I represent the good folks of Cheshire and Keene. I really appreciate your time and attention today. A few months ago, I ran into a wonderful advocate while handing out summer lunches with the New Hampshire Food Bank. While this, for me, was a one-off opportunity that I was glad to jump in on, here was a man who spent much of his life doing outreach for unhoused people and those struggling with substance use disorder. Not only has he experienced homelessness himself, but he knows and has gained the trust of people in our community who are struggling actively every day for the bare minimum of sustenance. A couple months later, as the weather cooled, he reached out to me with a deep concern. In his conversations, he had been hearing quite a bit about people sleeping outside being ticketed. Some of these people were sleeping right outside of our local shelter, which was full. In Keene, he said, this results in a $157 fine. In Manchester, it could be up to $250. In Nashua, it could be up to $1,000. This is something that's been a rising concern and one many have feared would be increasingly troublesome in the last couple of years. In late June 2024, the Supreme Court issued what is referred to as the Grants Pass decision. This ruling was the result of a case that focused on one fundamental question. Does the enforcement of camping ban ordinances, particularly when there are no other shelter beds available, violate the Eighth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution's clause against cruel and unusual punishment? In the wake of that decision, ordinances that essentially criminalize homelessness are deemed constitutional, or at least they do not constitute a violation of the Eighth Amendment. Since then, some New Hampshire municipalities have adopted ordinances against unauthorized camping on public property, and more recently, advocates on the ground have seen the predictable negative impact of increased enforcement on our growing unhoused population. In New Hampshire law, we entrust municipalities with the power to implement ordinances and bylaws, the violation of which may result in a fine of up to $1,000. As you know, we are a Dillon's Rule state, and as such, this is the only stated remedy we offer. While this may be appropriate in other contexts, I would argue that in this case, it is not. In fact, it is absolutely counterproductive. The individuals most likely to be in violation of this ordinance are, in fact, our unhoused neighbors. They are, in fact, the least likely to have the ability to pay, and stacking up debt creates an additional hurdle to them attaining housing stability. To put it simply, we are making it harder for folks to do what we hope they will do. My rationale in proposing that a non-monetary remedy be required for these specific violations is to provide municipalities with a tool which can be used in a positive, productive way, rather than what is currently a punitive and counterproductive one. The form of redress may look different in different municipalities, and the language of this proposed legislation reflects that. While it may make sense in one area to offer community service, this may not always be possible. I'm keenly aware of the limitations, having served as volunteer and guest services coordinator for our local food bank, in that there may be limited opportunities in a given area, or an individual's past convictions or certain offenses may hinder their ability to serve in certain volunteer roles. In response to concerns raised in the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee hearing, I drafted an amendment that clarifies the types of non-monetary penalties that may be provided. Note that this is explicitly in non-exhaustive list, i.e., it says not limited to, that the options be clearly stated in the ordinance or bylaw language, and that the method of redress be elected by the individual. These clarifications were appreciated, accepted, and the bill passed that committee unanimously and the House on the consent calendar as amended. What this legislative caveat would do is give municipalities the opportunity to customize an appropriate method of redress, whether community service, verified connection to, and enrollment in related services, possibly verification of temporary or long-term housing. In short, the goal is to have a humane response to meet the need, rather than exacerbate and compound what is already a very difficult situation for our unhoused neighbors and society as a whole. Those are my comments. I just wanted to actually check with you. I'm happy to take any questions, but we did have wonderful, and I'm grateful for the support of the New Hampshire Coalition to End Homelessness. And if you did not receive the letter that they submitted in support, I would love to pass that on to you.
Thank you very much. You're all set? Oh, no, there you go. Send her in.
Not off the hook that easily.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. I'm looking at the RSA just beyond the one that this one seeks to amend, 31:1 39-C. And it says a city or town may establish any, and it shall be adopted by the legislative body, a system for administrative enforcement of violations of any code, ordinance, bylaw. So is this something that the state should be doing or individual towns should be doing for themselves?
I think what the situation that we have now, essentially because we are Dillon's rule state and what we prescribe is for violations, a fine of up to $1,000. So I think we've actually kind of hamstrung our local governing bodies in that is the prescribed method. So I think there's a difference between what you're addressing, which is kind of the administrative process for it, whereas this is what is the actual penalty for it.
You can read the second one.
Suitable penalties. Oh, I see what you're saying. The one before that establishes it to ensure that, okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not actually,
I got it.
I would pull it up and look at it if I could.
Senator Oshler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So essentially what this would do would be to create a new role or add to a existing role within municipal government to be able to assess this alternative penalty and then have to follow up on it, right? Like,
What I think, what I would envision it looking like,
Yeah.
right, is we do have administrative roles within any municipality who would impose a fine like that. There would be an administrative role who would be receiving the penalty, right? So someone is already in that position. So in lieu of receiving that penalty, they would receive something like verification of a lease or verification of community service. So the way I see it, and the way that in speaking with people I've heard it, would be it would essentially be the same administrative individual. You would just be receiving something else. So essentially, it puts the onus on the individual who elects to have a separate penalty or a different kind of penalty.
can I follow up?
Yes, you may.
I don't think, so the individual being who's in violation,
Mhm.
it doesn't read to me that they get to elect a choice. It reads that the town gets to choose whether they want to use community service enrollment in a program designed to assist with stable housing or verification of secured stable housing. So this isn't a choice for the person who's in violation. This is a mandate for the place that is assessing the violation.
This is a mandate for the community to institute, if they choose to institute a violation in their ordinance or bylaws that is against camping or unauthorized camping or sleeping outside. So if a municipality decides to add that as an ordinance that requires a violation, they would also have to include in that there are these alternative methods that could be elected for these particular offenses. And particularly because these are offenses that it just doesn't make sense to institute a financial penalty for, right? So what it says in the bill is that it mandates the town to clearly state that these are the options, and it can be any of those. So like I said, it's a non-exhaustive list, but it is to give some clarity to what this might look like in different communities, right? So they can choose which of those or any other that would be the alternative. And then under that, I'm so sorry, because I can just grab the bill. For some reason, I didn't bring the language with me. But then under that, I think it's A and B, that's where it clarifies that it would be the individual who is in violation who would elect which of the options that town municipality decided to clearly state in their bylaws.
So, I'm sorry,
Yes, you may.
yeah, last follow-up. So, the services that have to be available, but not limited to, if those services, if you're a town that does not have a housing, officer, and you just have a part-time welfare person, and a lot of towns do have that, like 2 days a week, 5 hours, who's going to follow, like, who's supposed to follow up on this?
So the way that it's written in here,
Yeah.
what actually is required of the municipality is to have different options, non-monetary options for redress. So it does not necessarily require someone who is a housing advocate. It does not require anyone from the municipality to go out in the same way that if you had a financial penalty, the responsibility would be on the individual who owes that money to bring it to the town, right? To submit that and take care of that fine. So it doesn't necessarily require someone to go out from the municipality to go out and chase that person down. That is on the individual to provide verification that they have completed whatever else the municipality puts in there as an option.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm not explaining it well, but I hope it's coming
I'm
across.
gonna give Abbas the next turn.
I have a question. So I think what you're trying to do, it's not the policy itself, but if one were to get, as the law is written, if they have a fine of $500 or $1,000 and they were to appeal it or challenge it, whatnot, it's quite often that these kind of will get thrown out if you do some type of community service, which I understand they have the option in lieu of appealing it, but the difference is they're also found not responsible and it's thrown out. It's thrown out completely. Under this, they're essentially admitting they did something wrong and still doing the community service. Or am I reading that incorrectly?
Well, I guess I wonder what would change that. What would be different about this situation than any other?
It's a local.
Yeah, but the court's not ordering it. It's some local body that's doing it.
But if a local organization were to give you a ticket for violating something, there's no way to challenge it?
Government organization?
Yeah, the local government entity gives you a ticket.
I have the same questions that I was going to ask if the municipal association.
And the concern that I was going to raise was if you were to then try to appeal it and you say, well, how about community service? They might say, well, you had that option, didn't take it. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yes, and I guess I understand that concern, except that I don't see that as being any different as if you were to appeal a financial penalty.
Understood. All right, thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
My question is for you. Is the municipal association going to testify?
They are, yes.
Okay.
They're here.
Yep, she's coming. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank
Appreciate it. Rep Wheeler. Always remember, brevity is the soul of wit. Brevity is the soul of wit. I was just reminding you before you went.
I know you like brevity, so I will be as brief as I can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. For the record, my name is Representative Jonah O'Ryan Wheeler, and I represent the towns of Peterborough and Sharon. And I come today as the son of a woman who was on the brink and is on the brink of homelessness and has been since she was 14 years old, living every day of her life, wondering whether or not she's going to be able to maintain herself in the home that she was in. And I remember very clearly living from age 0 to now, also on that brink, when we fell into the woods. That's what I'll put it right now. We were homeless in the woods of Greenville in a place called Hippie Hollow, which was a group of homeless people who luckily had connections to be able to know somebody who was willing to let us stay on their land in the middle of a teepee circle. And so I'm not an expert on almost anything, but I am an expert on what it's like to be on the edge of society, what it's like to have to worry about whether or not you're going to get your apartment is still going to be there for you next month because of what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck in this society. And I'm also somebody who has done a lot of work in the city of Manchester and Portsmouth and Nashua and not so much Concord, but those 3 cities, to speak to the homeless people that are there, to get to hear what is actually going on in their life, to help them out in any way that I could, give them my last dollar if I have it, but to show them the avenues through which they might be able to find either a place to go or a way to, get by instead of being on the street in Beach Street or something like that. And so the way that I approach this piece of legislation that I'm a co-sponsor of is what Representative Newell alluded to. You can't get blood from a stone. If somebody is indigent, if somebody is unable to afford life, it doesn't really particularly matter if they're drugged out or they're indigent. They don't have the money. It doesn't exist for them. And so when we're talking about imposing monetary fines on them, I agree with Senator Abbas that many of the times these people who are indigent have those fines waived by the court in lieu of community service. But what we're doing here is putting that into statute, is saying that if there are people who have an inability to pay, if they're indigent, then the municipalities have a ability to put forward a non-monetary penalty on that individual so that we're not trying to extract blood from a stone. And so I think that what the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee did, a committee that isn't particularly, they're not supportive of government housing or they wouldn't use the term houseless. They don't, particularly have an affinity towards the state addressing this in any way, did amend this piece of legislation and pass it unanimously because they recognize that whether it be the welfare officer, I come from a town where our welfare officer works, I think, only 3 days a week or something along those lines. And so, and it's also a job which is a dual responsibility. So if I'm not mistaken, it is one of the administrators of the town who also does the welfare work in there. So she's got two responsibilities and has to move forward from there. But as Representative Newell mentioned, this is something that the individual themselves is going forward to do. So it's not that we have to have this bill doesn't create a need for an entirely new bureaucracy at a municipal level. And I think that the NHMA, in the testimony that I remember them giving to the House Criminal Justice Committee, suggested that was the case. The only thing I would say to them is that there are many times, or to you rather, in response to what they said in criminal justice, there are many times in which the lobbyists, because they don't particularly want a piece of legislation passed, use the most extreme example of what could occur if it does to prevent it from happening. But what we're talking about here is monetary fines being issued to people who can't pay them, who are on the brink of society, and who have nobody to advocate for them. I mean, we're talking about a situation where this state has no more blood in it. And so the people who are walking around without, the stones who are walking around without any blood in them, our needles are going to break if we continue to try to get the blood out of them. So I'm going to be as nice as I can. I respect you, Senator Gannon, but I really, really urge this committee to pass this piece of legislation, common sense piece of legislation that made it through the House Policy Committee on a unanimous basis after vigorous debate in that committee, amendments. It wasn't just off the fly, unanimously voted on. It was a slow, careful process that the committee took to bring this legislation to you. And I hope, Mr. Chairman, that you and I and the sponsor of the piece of legislation and the members of the minority caucus in your committee will be able to work together with the NHMA and others to come up with a bill that works to make sure that our homeless citizens are being protected and that our municipalities are as well.
Thank you very much, Representative Wheeler. Senator Abbas does have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm just asking if it's a better outcome for someone who were to appeal the thing, because they would have to check off which box they're electing, right? But if they were to go through the administrative appeal process and do that, it's quite common that the citations dropped, provided they do community service. The difference in outcome is it that they're not found responsible for anything. By electing to do the community service up front, you're essentially admitting that you did it and then doing the community service. Now, it may seem like the same thing, but one of them is a responsibility, or I call it a negative finding on your record versus a non-negative. So I would think it's better to get it, if you can get it thrown out through the community service, that's a good outcome. But if you check the box to do the community service that way, you're accepting that as, as a you're fine, but then that's how I understand it.
So the way you've put it, I think, is correct in the sense that you're, if you were to appeal it, and if you were to get that appeal overturning your record, then you would have nothing on the record, and it would look a lot better than if you did community service here. But I think the difference is that most people, and we were speaking about this yesterday with a different bill, most people don't understand the appeals process, the hearings process, especially if you're somebody, you know, on the streets of Beach Street or something like that. If you're addicted to fentanyl and the system catches you in a wrong moment and you're now either, you know, going to be fined or put in prison or something along those lines, but to speak to a specific hypothetical for this bill, put in a fine will be imposed on you, then you're not particularly someone, and I know these people, who understands the appeals process, knows how to get a lawyer, knows how to appeal to the court, knows how to advocate for yourself to be able to do those things. And so they take the monetary fine that's imposed on them and they don't pay it. And so that is a negative on their record that we would be addressing here by allowing them to do community service or an enrollment or whatever other non-monetary fine a municipality has come up with. We are allowing that individual to have a choice as to whether or not they want the imposition of the fine or if they want, I mean, I'm answering a question, just to be clear.
No, you are responding to it.
Right, exactly. But, or if they want, if they, sorry, I could hear people at the table.
I think what you're suggesting is I may have been asking too much of someone facing some.
Well, exactly. And they have the opportunity, even with this, to still go about the appeal. So if they did understand the process, if they felt that they were worthy of an appeal, they could still have that appealed from their record. But what this does is allow that individual who doesn't necessarily want to move forward on that, the opportunity to have that option for a non-monetary fine. And I think there's absolutely a way to get this done to where it doesn't overburden our municipalities with a bureaucracy that I don't believe would be created by this bill, but some do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Wheeler. Bob Keating. Afternoon, Mr. Keating.
Press the button. Can't hear. Press the button. When it lights up red, you're good.
I'm on, okay. Sorry about that. Thank you, Chairperson, Senator Gagnon, the rest of the members of the committee. My name is Bob Keating. I'm from Nashua. I'm a member of Granite State Organizing Project. And after hearing the remarks of the two representatives, I don't know if I could add much more than both the technical aspect and also the personal aspect, but I will add my perspective here. I'm a retired marriage and family therapist, over 50 years experience, and also have spent about 3.5 decades working on policy and advocacy with various agencies in Nashua. Currently, one of them is volunteering on 5 days a week at a day cafe at St. Patrick's Church in Nashua that offers coffee, snacks, and fellowship, many to the people that are homeless, but it's open to all. It's diagonally across from City Hall. And I've followed this ordinance and for an extended period of time. And related to next Wednesday in Nashua, that what we call the warming station, which is the old cafeteria of the middle school and previously the high school at one point. And that will close. And also the Nashua Soup Kitchen and Shelter has what they call an overflow space, which means that in their regular shelters, people have beds, but in the overflow, which is a generic room that's used for a variety of ways, but in the winter, they open that up so they can have more capacity for people to sleep. And that's going to be closing on the 15th. And that what that will mean is that between 60 to 70 people on a given night will no longer have a shelter for themselves. And although the ordinance was passed in the fall and went into effect on December 1st, in the large extent, the vast majority of people have been able to go to the existing shelters plus this warming shelter. But as of the 15th, that will not be available. So they'll be subject to not having a place, but also they will be subject to the ordinance, which will mean that it will be sort of double jeopardy, if you will. The ordinance is difficult enough, and the speakers just previously, and I imagine that the questions you had and the nodding, I think that you have an understanding of, what that is to not have a place. Well, this makes it all more because not only are they subject to the penalties of the ordinance in terms of financial, and previous speakers have spoken about that, and that was much of the discussion, or at least a significant part of the discussion, to say, here are people that more often don't have enough money to have a room to stay in for a night, let alone that they'll have up to $1,000 to pay. It also means that people will now be pushed into a position where they have to hide. I mean, it's hard enough not to have a place, but to hide the basic biological need to sleep. So, that's where we are at this point in time. And I can say just today I was speaking to Ella, who's had a long work history in terms of laboring, driving trucks, and had a number of different physical issues that had come up. And he asked me, he said, what's happening about the ordinance? And I know that he and others just were real pleased when they heard that the House had passed a law and bringing it here to the Senate that says there needs to be alternatives. And again, I think there has been a lot of remarks by the two representatives. It gives the municipality an opportunity to provide something that could have a much more meaningful impact on them. And it gives some level of choice to the person who's in this particular way. And this doesn't provide housing for anybody, but what it simply says, I think it validates a basic worth of a human being. That says everyone shouldn't be subject to a penalty like that if you have no means to be able to sustain yourself in housing. So I appreciate your review of this and hope that you'll speak favorably to it and pass it on to the Senate. It will not change all these things. It's hard to imagine that we're still in this position after 1948. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights says everyone should have housing. Our own government in 1949 said everyone in a short period of time will have decent and affordable housing. But this does say we're trying to do what we can within the limitations at the present time. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Senator, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And I have more of a statement than a question
Sure.
for you. We all universally, I believe that this is a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Implementing it is another idea. There are state laws and there are local laws in the ordinances. And it could be a court involved or it could be somebody at the town. So I don't want you to take our questions as we aren't grateful for what you're doing and what all homeless advocates are doing. We think this is a great idea, but we're also charged with how it gets implemented. And
Absolutely.
that's what we're struggling with right here.
Yeah. No, appreciate that. That's a technicality to say, look, you've got multiple statutes here, that like the previous one about protection about animals too, that you had those kinds of things. So I appreciate it because we want to have something that's going to be able to work.
Yes, thank you.
No.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sarah Cohen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Burke Cohen. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association. The New Hampshire Municipal Association is opposed to HB 1091. I'm going to echo what Senator Reardon said. This has good intentions, I feel like. Unfortunately, I think when it comes to implementation, it will be problematic. First and foremost, for municipalities, municipalities have the local option to adopt ordinances. Like I'm really loud today, I'm sorry. Adopt ordinances. This would mandate what type of penalty they have to adopt if they adopt a certain ordinance. This, just like the list, I think the sponsor was talking about the list of non-monetary penalties is chosen by the municipality. We believe that the penalty itself should be a local decision. We have certainly some issues, or also issues with the fact that the non-monetary list is determined by the municipality in this, mandated by the municipality. And then from there, if an individual violates this ordinance and there is a penalty for it, or non-monetary, they elect the non-monetary penalty, but then they also elect what that non-monetary penalty is to them, what they're choosing it to be. That is a bit odd for municipalities. In addition to that, there's nothing to indicate what happens when that individual violates this ordinance continuously. What is the next step for that? Do they just keep electing non-monetary penalties? If they're not in compliance, how does that move forward? Presumably, it would move forward like a regular penalty. I think Senator Reardon had mentioned 3139C, thank you. And it would move on from there, that the court would have to get involved, eventually essentially issuing a default. All of this takes resources from municipalities, although the individual would be tasked with fulfilling the non-monetary penalty. There needs to be someone who collects this information, or checks off the boxes to alert, let's say, local law enforcement, hey, this individual did complete their non-monetary penalty, so here's where we're at. In a time where municipalities are already very tight with their their finances, this could be problematic. Additionally, you know what? I think I'm going to just stop there and answer questions.
Go ahead, Senator Reardon.
I have a little list, if you'll indulge me here.
I'm going to just grab my water.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Senator Reardon.
Is a bylaw and an ordinance the same thing?
That's what it seems like where it's putting it.
Well, the statute uses bylaw in one section about what a town is authorized to do, an ordinance in a different section, and they have different remedies at the bottom of them. So if we're going to work with this, we've got to be consistent with our language.
Right. And so the way I'm reading, let's see, we're looking at 3139, which is the power to make bylaws.
Right.
And then what's interesting is 3139C is the administrative enforcement of ordinances, but then it also mentions bylaws in the enforcement of ordinances. So I'm thinking that there is some, I'm assuming that they are very similar in nature, especially since the adoption and enforcement seem to be the same, in the same section.
So it looks like they're used interchangeably, so maybe we could do that. The next question I have is, an ordinance is violated, a city ordinance is violated, sleeping outside. There's a state law about that too. There's a state law that prohibits on state property that you can't. So we're going to assume we're only dealing with folks that have violated a local ordinance here, because we're talking about something completely different if we're talking about state law here.
That's what it seems to indicate in the
So
bill.
a violation of a local ordinance, which is akin to traffic kinds of things, you didn't get the right building permit, is that going to go to the district court, or is that going to be handled by the town?
So if you look at 3139C, Administrative Enforcement of Ordinances, the town, when it adopts its ordinances, appears to also adopt the administrative enforcement of these violations. So I think different towns adopt different things, but the administrative enforcement looks like it could be a couple of different things. They could adopt mailing it in, right? The plea by mail.
It says that actually
Right,
in here,
'cause-
mailing it in.
Right, because that's also 3139-D, which is local ordinance citation pleas by mail.
Yep.
And that talks about the plea by mail, talks about that if you don't send it in by the appropriate date, then it does go to court and you could be in default. So some of this has to do with how the locality is adopting its ordinances and how it is adopting that enforcement mechanism. I mean, there's a high likelihood that the enforcer is going to be the local law enforcement.
So that's exactly my next question. Who out of town is enforcing that? You're thinking it's the local police?
That's what it seems to be. Now, I think that would be dependent on the ordinance, because if you have an ordinance, say, for homemade food, maybe pickles, that would be the health officers. And not necessarily local law enforcement. Same with like building code. Technically, some ordinances could be involved, as well as permitting.
Yeah, I get that with building code. I'm familiar with that process. So if we did enabling legislation, I don't want to get involved with the court. I don't want to address the issues that may be going to a court. A town that has an ordinance that they've created locally could also have enabling legislation where they're setting, I'm sure they've set their, whatever their violation, what the penalty is for a violation now. If we did enabling legislation for that town, if they want to adopt non-monetary penalties, then they'd be allowed to do it. Or do they have that ability already?
I assume that they could. So the way sorry, I can't see you when I have my glasses on, and I can't see my computer when I have my glasses off. The way it is written, at the towns may enforce the observance of the bylaws by suitable penalties not exceeding $1,000 for each offense to ensure to such uses as the town may direct. Now, that is 3139 Roman numeral 3. So that indicates to me that municipalities could adopt already non-monetary penalties if they so choose.
And it may be clearer if we add non-monetary penalties to that line.
It would be clearer, and to be perfectly frank, if it was clear, perhaps in that paragraph, municipalities would consider non-monetary penalties for
a range of other
things.
So that brings me back to that sentence says for bylaws, violations of bylaws, the Roman 3 that you just sent me.
Yes.
And it is not the same as 3139-C, small c, where they talk about written notice of violations in administrative enforcement system, and they use the word ordinance in that.
Yes.
So whatever the town is working with, ordinance or bylaw, doesn't mean we amend both of these, both 3139 and 3139C?
I'm not entirely sure what the answer is to that question, just by virtue of Roman numeral 1 also says any town may establish by ordinance adopted by the legislative body system for the administrative enforcement of violations of municipal code, ordinance, bylaw, or regulation.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit unclear for me, and I would have to look into that more, just because I don't want to answer the question and
have had a moment where I lost my mind.
And I'll note that the very last line of that section says the system may also provide for a schedule of enhanced penalties, because we've already talked about $1,000 before.
Correct.
So maybe however, penalties may not exceed the maximum.
Correct.
So if we had it in the paragraph Roman 3 of 31-39,
Yes,
then that would get brought forward to this section here.
it seems like it.
Okay. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else wish to testify on 1091? Come on down, ma'am. Good afternoon.
My name is Griselli. Before I read my testimony, I just want to clarify some of the things that I heard. Confusion since I personally have been through it. I was homeless, I pitched my tent in front of City Hall to make a point because the city ordinance said that if you were homeless and if you were public camping, that they could not make you take your tent down unless they found you overnight shelter. And so that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to make a point. There were no overnight shelters. Regardless, they were still making me take it down, and I was cited for quote unquote public camping because I wouldn't take it down. So that's being cited. This wouldn't change anything except for the punishments of what it is. If it's money and they impose money, the same exact way that they would impose money, you just replace that money with the alternatives that are listed in this bill. Because it all has a process. You get cited by the police. The police cited me, and then I have to go to court. So that was that part. And the bylaws, the difference between the bylaws and the ordinances is that the ordinances are what for the people, for the common people, for the residents. And the bylaws are more of the way the procedures go, the internal, the governance, the way that they govern the town meetings or whatever. It's more internal than applicable to the outside. That's what the bylaws are. So as I said, I'm from Manchester. How did we get here? How did we reach the point where we are deciding on how to punish people for sleeping outside? When did the idea that everyone deserves quality of life become optional? I'll tell you how we got here. We got here because the people making these decisions are disconnected from the people living this reality. The individuals most affected by these policies, people experiencing homelessness, people struggling with substance use, people dealing with mental health challenges, people living in poverty, and individuals re-entering society after incarceration are not meaningfully represented in these conversations. Many are not participating in the process at all, not because they do not care, but because the system is not built with us in mind. So decisions are being made about us without us. We talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion, but those principles mean nothing if the people most impacted don't have a seat at the table. Instead, policy is shaped by those who have never experienced what it means to stand in a welfare line, to go without stable housing, to struggle to access to get treatment, to return to society after incarceration with little or no support at all, or to face the loss of their children due to poverty and instability. And in many cases, such as my own, all of the above apply. That disconnect is crucial because when the people writing policy have never lived the consequences of it, the result is exactly what we are discussing today. Solutions that manage the visibility of the problem rather than address its root cause. Empathy is free. Compassion is free. It costs nothing to care about another human being, especially one who is already struggling to survive. And yet here we are. Some might say that I don't have any idea what people have been through and they're absolutely right about that. But what they have not been through is reflected in policy. What they have not been impacted by is reflected in policy. Let me be clear. I support this bill because it reduces harm. Replacing monetary penalties with non-monetary alternatives is objectively better than issuing fines of up to $1,000 to people who are already experiencing homelessness. That current approach is not accountability. It is punishment for poverty. But supporting this bill also requires confronting a deeper truth. We are not debating whether homelessness should be criminalized. We are debating on how to do it. And I'm not speaking on this from a distance. I've lived it. For nearly the past 3 years, I was homeless. I have only recently secured affordable housing, and that alone has changed my life drastically. For the first time in a very long time, I'm not living with the constant fear of how I will come up with the rent or whether I'm going to lose my housing and end up back on the street. That kind of stress is constant. It takes over your thinking. And when that instability goes on long enough without real help or resolution, people begin to lose hope. I've seen and met some people who don't even want to be housed anymore. And that blows my mind. That didn't happen overnight. That is a result of systems that fail to respond and fail to provide real solutions. In my case, that instability did not lead to support. It led to escalation. My children were removed, not because I abused them or neglected them, but because of my housing situation. And the system, DCYF, that intervened did not assist in resolving that issue. The very reason my children were removed was never meaningfully or otherwise addressed. No assistance with securing housing, no support for security deposit, no meaningful pathway to stabilization. The housing I eventually obtained, I secured on my own. At the same time, I have continued to face ongoing barriers in trying to reunify with my child. Instead of resolving the issue that led to removal, the system has made it more difficult to overcome it. As I sit here before you, I'm still fighting, trying to reunify with my son, because once you become involved in these systems, it does not simply resolve. It follows you. It continues. It creates ongoing barriers that make it harder to rebuild, harder to stabilize, and harder to reunify your family. What began as a moment of housing instability became long-term system involvement. This is the larger issue. Systems that are presented as support become systems of escalation. When they fail to address the very problems that they claim to intervene on, it's not for lack of policy. It's not for lack of procedures and protocol or rules. It's for lack of oversight and accountability. And not because it doesn't exist, but because it is failing to represent a neutral position. I understand that what I am describing may be difficult to grasp. It may be even hard to believe, but I want to be clear that it is hard for me to believe too. And I'm the one who's lived it. And that is exactly why this continues to happen. Because when people hear experiences like this, they doubt them. They minimize them. They assume that there must be more to the story. And as a result, the people living through it are not believed. They're not heard and they're not taken seriously. For the past 3 years, I've spoken about what happens. I have attended public meetings. I have followed the proper procedures. I have filed complaints. I have grievances. I have tried to address these issues directly through the very systems that claim to provide oversight and accountability. And nothing has changed. Instead, I was dismissed and labeled as angry and ignored. Meanwhile, the laws were not being followed. The standards that are supposed to guide these systems are not being upheld. And the very people these systems are meant to serve were left without protection. That is how this continues. Not because it's rare, but because it's not believed. And so when we talk about penalties tied to homelessness, understand that the consequences are already severe. They're already life-altering, and they're already punitive. A person sleeping outside is not creating the problem. They're living inside the outcome of systemic failures. HB 1091 matters because it interrupts one harmful cycle. When someone cannot pay a fine, that debt can escalate into deeper system involvement. Replacing fines with community service or compliance-based conditions still treats homelessness as a violation to be managed rather than a condition to be resolved. Which brings us to the larger question. Why, in one of the wealthiest nations in the world, are we designing penalties for people who have nowhere to go? HB 1091 is a step in the right direction, but we should not be satisfied with making penalties more humane. We should be asking why they exist at all. I urge the committee to pass HB 1091 while also committing to policies that address root causes of homelessness and ensure that the systems designed to help do not instead cause further harm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All set? We're set. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Does anyone else wish to testify who I missed? Seeing none, that'll end the hearing. Motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brendan. So when are you going on Monday? Tuesday? When do you leave?